Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to see you all here. My name's Joseph Plant. I'm the Permaculture Manager and Research Advisor here at Centre for Sustainable Development. My background is in commercial systems planning, and we at present, although I'm more or less a newbie to the Island School, we've got a huge number of projects we're working on, from creating the existing plan of campus to the proposed plan of campus, and we're also looking at food security and increasing that here at the Island School. I'm now going to pass you on to my esteemed colleague, Lee.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks in advance for your support. We really appreciate you all being here. Again, my name is Lee Schmidt, and I probably have one of the greatest jobs in the world. I teach a course called Seminar at the Island School. I also coach. I lead kayak trips, and I scrub a pot or two. But in addition to that, I collaborate with the CSD, and particularly in the fields of sustainability initiatives, sustainable agriculture, and permaculture, which you'll learn about this morning. I've been a teacher here at the Island School for 4 years, and this actually marks my 18th year of teaching. So, which is kind of funny because Joe and I both turned 28 this semester. The math doesn't really add up, but I would like to pass the torch over to the permaculture team, and I think I want to just coin a phrase from Andy. He said this morning, he said meaningful and authentic, and I really want to echo those sentiments as well, because the research that we've been doing here has been truly meaningful, truly authentic, really pragmatic, and I feel like this is a group that has the possibility to change the world one day at a time, one meal at a time, and one bite at a time. Thank you very much.
I always have to give Lee and Joe another round of applause. We wouldn't be as good if it weren't for them. I am Oliver Perizzo.
I'm Sophie Colantuano. I'm Meg Barnes.
I'm Sam Peck.
I'm Margot Solvit. And I'm Caroline Woodard.
And welcome to Permaculture at the Island School. Permaculture, as we are here, we are conducting a comprehensive food audit to establish an environmentally and socioeconomically sustainable food system. Now, what does that mean? There's a whole other meaning to that. Permaculture, the art of permanent agriculture, which is sustainable ecosystems that are intended to be self-sufficient and totally sustainable. So what was for dinner? What did we have for dinner last night? We had chicken, we had salad, we had a whole bunch of sauces, we had ranch, we had all these different things. And arguably, you've asked what's for dinner in your house, and that's a question that's been asked for thousands of years. But really, what was for dinner? Where did that come from? How did it get here? There's a whole lot more to food than you really think. There's certain things called carbon footprints, carbon emissions, and food miles. And these things really have an impact. And here at the Island School, we want to live well in a place. But how can we live well in a place when our food isn't helping us, and it's releasing carbon gas? And we'll get onto that soon. But the reason we're doing a food audit is to establish and find out how bad are we really right now.
So for our research, we're focused on assessing food systems in the Bahamas, but more specifically here on Eleuthera. So Eleuthera has a really rich and complex agricultural past. At one point, it was considered to be the breadbasket of the Bahamas, which means that it was really successful in exporting produce, particularly pineapples. However, now that is not the case. So as you can see on the board, there are a few factors that lined up to create a decline in agriculture on Eleuthera. So the first one is a decrease in farms. At one point, when Eleuthera was at its agricultural peak, there were around 5,000 farmers here. However, unfortunately, that number is close to 250 farmers now. And this is mainly due to a changing economy from agriculture to tourism. And then on top of that, you also have an increase in globalization. So what I mean by this is that with the global market increasing, it suddenly became a lot cheaper to import produce from other countries than to source it locally. And also on top of that, you have an increase in instability in the field of agriculture, and that's due to scant natural resources, a lack of fresh water, and agriculturally poor soils. So all of these economic, environmental, and social factors added up to create the perfect equation for food insecurity. So what exactly is food insecurity? Food insecurity is defined as the state of being without a reliable source to a sufficient quantity of affordable and nutritious food. So in the Bahamas, we are food insecure. In fact, around 90% of the food is imported, meaning, of course, that only 10% is actually produced in country. So to give you an idea of how this ties into our research at the Island School, on the screen you can see a visual representation of food insecurity. So this is a picture of a scene that happens every Tuesday in Rock Sound. A boat is coming from Nassau, and it's dropping off the majority of the food that we consume on our campus. And this food is coming from Bahamas Food Service, which is a subsidiary of Cisco. So we are observing that we are very much a product of our immediate environment in terms of food insecurity. However, the problem that we're trying to address with our research is figuring out exactly how food insecure we are at the Island School. And we're doing this specifically through statistics regarding our food systems to figure out how we can adapt and better tackle food insecurity in the future.
So we have 4 questions that have guided the direction of our research so far at Permaculture. Our first question is, where does our food come from and what are its environmental implications? 2, what defines a sustainable food system on Eleuthera? 3, what are our current food demands and how can we meet them? And 4, how will this research impact future campus planning? This question is our most important one, as our research is focused on this, and eventually our research will be reflected in the layout of the campus. 3 food audits, 9 meals, 18 dishes, and 1,050 pounds of peanut butter. Let me explain. In order for us to collect the data we needed to answer our guiding questions, we headed to the kitchen to complete multiple comprehensive food audits. We also analyzed budgets and we examined receipts. While at the kitchen, we weighed each food item that went into creating the entire meal. So that's everything from the spices, the grains, the meats, and the vegetables. We also took down other data such as food company, food source, and we compiled all this data onto a spreadsheet. It was during our field days that we found out we used a whole lot of peanut butter as an institution. And we dove in further into our analysis, and we were able to hypothesize that we have a large carbon footprint, we have high food insecurity, and we have high food miles.
So to go a little bit deeper into the methods, I'm going to use this jar of olives as an example. So we would go into the kitchen and we would record down, we would try to find out information about all of the pieces of a meal that was going into the meal that day. So for these olives, we would record the company, the item, maybe its weight, the food group, and its first source and second source. And now what I really want you to pay attention to is the first source and second source. The first source is somewhere where a food commodity is grown or harvested. And then second source is where it gets shipped to before it makes it to its final destination. For these olives, they were harvested in Spain, even though the can says Italy. And then then they were flown to Texas for processing, finally shipped over to Nassau, and finally barged here to Eleuthera. So that's it's going all over the place. It's a prime example of farming upstream, according to Weber et al., and I'll get more into that on the next slide. So farming upstream is essentially getting all different parts of a meal or all different parts of a food item from all around the world, upstream in the process before it actually comes together. You can see in this map, these are 4 items from a pretty standard breakfast, and they came from all over the world. We have France, Chicago, California, Guatemala, and that's just 4 items of one breakfast, so a pretty small part of our total food. So the web of food that we get from all over the world is in reality much larger. So this is the important part. In order to actually find out the carbon emissions of all of our food, we used an economic input-output life cycle assessment, or an EIOLCA. Sounds complicated, and there's a lot of equations that go into it, but the theory can be represented by this diagram here. So take these olives. They had inputs. They didn't just pop up out of the ground. Some inputs might have been seeds, fertilizer, water. You have to water the trees, and all of those things emitted CO2. Manufacturing fertilizer emits CO2, farming seeds emit CO2, and all of those go into the final footprint of this can of olives. Next, you have production. You maybe have to slice up the olives. You have to can them. You have to put a little label on the can. All of that emits CO2, and that goes into the final footprint of this can of olives. Next, you have distribution. You got to fly it all over the world. You got to truck it all over the world. You got to barge it all over the world. You got to get it places, especially in this increasingly globalized economy. That's one of the biggest parts of this thing's carbon footprint. It gets flown everywhere, and that emits CO2, which goes into the final footprint of this can of olives. Finally, you have consumption and waste. That's when it's in the supermarket. The supermarket is using a refrigerator. That takes CO2. You drive to the supermarket, you pick it up, you take it home, you eat it. All of that emits CO2, and that also goes in the final footprint of this can of olives. Last, you have waste. You drive to you throw this into the garbage. It gets picked up by a truck, goes to a dump. Maybe you throw it in the ocean. Maybe it gets burned. Maybe it gets pyrolyzed, and whatever way, it emits CO2 somehow. So this can of olives, although it looks small, it packs a huge environmental punch from all of these different inputs and all the different phases of its life cycle. It has a lot of carbon emissions. It's more than you would think.
Looking at our food audit data and going through receipts and checking out campus numbers, we found that there is a positive correlation between food budget and people on campus. So from the years 2012 to 2016, we have seen that the budget, which is the y-axis there with the number of people, has been increasing as the number of people on campus has been increasing. And it's important to know what our food budget is, because with that information, we can figure out where and how we want to allocate some money towards maybe buying more local food, buying more environmentally friendly foods, so that we can decrease our carbon footprint. Okay, not yet, sorry. So then probably our most important data results are the results from the EIO-LCA. So after inputting all the data, we found that the 3 highest food groups, which we've color-coded and organized here, were red meat that had 329 tons of CO2, which is a lot. Then dairy, 109, and white meat, 76.2 tons of CO2. And then we also looked at the whole fiscal year of 2016 to figure out how much of our food is local, which we defined as all the foods coming from the Bahamas, because Eleuthera couldn't really provide all the foods we need. And we found that 11% of our food is local, and that's including the aquaponic system and the farm. We found that we, as an institution, consumed 91 tons of food in 2016, which is equal to 57 American mid-sized cars. So that's a lot of food. And that food traveled 1,889,300 kilometers, which is the equivalent to making a round trip to the moon 2.5 times. So that's a lot of food miles and therefore carbon emissions. Also, we found that per person per meal on average in 2016, each person produced 3.7 kilograms of CO2. And that's equal to 2 of those olives that Sam is holding right here. Or a really large cat like Fritter, if you want to think about it like that. And finally, over the course of 2016, the total CO2 emissions were 732.4 tons, which if you looked at the 91 tons of food statistic that I made saying that it's equal to 57 mid-sized cars, you can only imagine how many emissions that is.
Through our research, we did run into a few limitations, and all of them were human error. The first one was the EIO-LCA calculations. The EIO-LCA was created in 2002, so it is arguably outdated. The next one is quantifying amounts and quantities of local food. When we get food from farmers, it might be a bushel of tomatoes or a bucket of tomatoes, so we have to find out what exactly is a bushel of tomatoes. The next one would be food sourcing. So it was kind of difficult for us to trace exactly where the food did come from. The next one would be quantifying meals in dynamic population. Our population on campus is always changing, so whether it be EP groups coming in or large events like Parents Weekend, the numbers are changing in the dining hall, so it was difficult for us to put a solid number on how many people are eating on campus. This is the first year that permaculture has been a thing at the Island School in the first semester that we have done it as a research group. So our research did act as a baseline for future. So we did have a few ideas of what the future of permaculture will look like. The first one would be looking at campus planning and farm expansion. We're looking at expanding maybe the farm or the orchard or aquaponics, so we can create or produce as much food on campus as possible. We'd also like to start collaborating with nonprofit groups such as One Eleuthera, and also collaborate more with local growers. That ties in more with the budget expenditures. We'd like to put more money into the local economy and start buying from local growers so we can go down the street for food rather than across the world. A more immediate thing we're looking to do is start Meatless Mondays. So as on Margot's slide showed, red meat is the highest emission out of all our food groups. So something as small as eliminating meat 1 day a week will help us take a step in the right direction. Here's our literature cited. We'd like to thank Allison Carpin, a Bahamas Fulbright Scholar, the CSD Farm Crew, the Island School kitchen staff, Rodney Thompson, a local farmer, our research advisors and assistants, Jim Anderson and Karen Knight. We'd like to dedicate our presentation in loving memory of Manasseh Cartwright, our kitchen manager who passed away earlier this semester. We hope we didn't put you to sleep. Do you have any questions?
Terrific presentation. If you want to make this even more competitive, you looked at the carbon footprint of packaging.
Oh, well,
I mean, this can. You could expand your map also to where it's sourced from.
Yeah, that is Oh yeah, sorry. The question was do we take into account packaging, wrapping of all the food items that we have? And the answer is, I believe, yes. That is part of the food item. I just put it down. You can see it. The olives. The olives, like, yeah, this wrapping, that is a part of what the EIO-LCA looks at, and that's what makes it so complex. Because in my slide, I talked about inputs, but the thing is, all of those inputs have inputs, and those inputs have inputs, and so on and so forth. So you really have to go way back to like the invention of the wheel before you can actually find where a product really started, which is one of the things that makes it so difficult to perform a real life cycle assessment on any food commodity. But yes, the packaging is included in the carbon footprint. Yes.
On one of your slides that showed the food consumption and the cost,
Mm-hmm.
there were the last two, so it looks like there was a pretty big jump going down and then a pretty big jump going up. Do you know what accounts for that?
Yeah, Oliver, you want to take it?
So only a couple of years ago, first of all, the question that was asked was, what is that drop in the budget and then the increase in the budget? And only a couple of years ago, there was a difference. There was a couple differences in the food in the kitchen where it was a thing with staff where staff could probably get a couple of key items for free. As you know, food is expensive down here, so we changed that up a little bit. And as you know, there wouldn't be a lot of happiness with that, but. Over time, we changed. It's gone to back where staff will have to pay for food again, and there's a day in the week where staff can get food from the kitchen. So that's partially due to the budget. Anybody else?
As far as growing locally is concerned, my understanding, I would imagine one of your challenges is with climate change and increased hurricanes, which are getting greater salination in the soil. And so, what is the future of ever bringing a liver back to a place that would be thriving agriculturally? Is it a pipe dream or is it possible?
So the question was, with the increasing effects of climate change and possibly salinization of the soil, is it possible to bring Eleuthera back to that breadbasket status that it had a couple of decades ago? And I think the answer is that it's not really in the scope of our study, so I can't give you a definite answer, but in my opinion, I think using permaculture techniques, such as the ones that may be employed on this campus, that can regenerate soil, give nutrients back to the land, I think it would definitely be possible to kind of rejuvenate the soil here, even with the increasing effect of climate change. Yeah. Does anybody want to add on?
So what we do at the farm here can help with soil rejuvenation. We use a lot of compost. We use all the compost we get in the kitchen. We turn that and we use it as like a top layer of soil so we can grow stuff on it. Also, the chicken tractors, I don't know if you guys were able to check those out. They move around, and then the waste that the chickens create are used as fertilizer. And then also the pigs, they turn the soil. So there's a lot of things, permaculture methods you can use to help rejuvenate soil, especially in a place that's so difficult to grow out here. Okay. Yeah.
Along that line, what's the possibility of expanding that in the local population and creating some courses that spread that in the island?
So his question was, what's the possibility of teaching local people and expanding the knowledge of permaculture here on Eleuthera? And I would say that it already is a learning space. Actually, the farm right now acts more as a teaching place than it does as an actual productive farm. And that's something we would change, hopefully, with farm expansion, so where we could actually be a real productive establishment. But as of now, I don't know if you saw on our acknowledgements page, it shows the farm crew. They are learning, and I mean, they already knew a lot of those methods, but they learn and also teach each other ways to maximize as much space as they can, to grow as much as they can sustainably. And with foundations like the One Eleuthera Foundation, we're hoping that farmers can collaborate and teach each other, and then also vary when they harvest certain foods so that people can have certain fruits and vegetables throughout the year instead of a boom and a bust time that isn't as sustainable.
Yeah, just to add on to that a little bit, it's a two-way street in terms of like teaching and learning at the island school. There's also a lot of I mean, obviously people have been farming here long before we got here, and they've been doing it fairly successfully. A great example of like an adaptation to the land, I guess, is called these banana holes. So the limestone bedrock here is very porous, and sometimes you'll just get these like sinkholes that are like 10 feet deep. And what local farmers have do, Joseph, a person who works on our farm here, he also has his own farm. What you do is you plant a banana tree in that hole, and then it grows up, and then hurricanes can't knock it over, and you can get bananas out of it. And if you ever burn off weeds, all that biochar, that like fertilizer, goes into the hole. And so there's been permaculture here long before we got here, just under a different name. And so we learn as well. Yeah. Oh, you want to add on?
Of course. For those of you who are wondering what One Eleuthera actually is, it's a charitable foundation around central Eleuthera, right outside the airport most of you flew into. It's a community outreach program, so it brings in folks who might have not gotten to the highest extent of their high school degree. They might have not gotten the education they need, and they essentially go to One Eleuthera, which is part hotel, part foundation, part farm, where they're essentially bringing in folks from the community, teaching them all life skills they need: farming, construction, all these other like reading, writing, all these different things. And it's helping them to gain these skills and knowledge. And one of their biggest things is their farm. And working with their farm in collaboration with the Island School, it's one of our biggest goals, and we have been. We've a couple of groups with seminar have gone to One Eleuthera to help out.